Hi, welcome to the Oliver Feder YouTube channel. Today I'm getting super close to being able to drive my newly installed 1.9 liter ALH turbo diesel motor in my Mark I Volkswagen, and I just have a few more things to wrap up. To kind of summarize, I have my cooling system connected and working. Unfortunately, I have a silly leak on this sensor, but we'll fix that later. I have my oil cooler routed and working, and the fan will kick on with the radiator fans. I have my reservoir all moved and set up. I have my fuel system set up. I've run the car for its first 30 minutes of braking at different RPMs, and it didn't run away or do anything too scary. So today I'm down to just a last couple of things. I need to put axles back in the car so I can set it down, because if you don't put your axles in and tighten them, you will roach your bearings immediately with the weight of the car on them. And also, just to drive it, I need to put the axles in. And I need to put oil back in it. The oil has already been drained, and I need to give it its first kind of break-in oil change. And then I gotta work on my intercooler piping and reconnecting the Arduino. So, the intercooler piping is going to be basically the same as it was before, or at least to test it, that's gonna work just fine. But it needs cleaned. So it came from the last engine. There's like oil in there. There's potentially little bits of contaminants in there, including inside the intercooler itself. That tends to catch a lot of oil and stuff. So I'm gonna take all of those pipes to a car wash and thoroughly blast them out with water before using them on this brand new engine, which is just prudent. So a note on break-in and engine break-in in general. I found this stuff on Amazon. This is engine break-in oil specifically for break-in, and it's 20W50. And right now I think the low we're getting in Denver is like, I don't know, 55 degrees maybe. So this is totally fine even at this heavy weight, and the heavy weight is honestly kind of a good thing for breaking in the motor. And then the thing that makes it a break-in specific oil is that this has no wear additives to it. It's not synthetic whatsoever. And the idea is that when we break in a new motor, we're letting everything kind of seat and get used to where it is in a controlled fashion, and then we're specifically looking to have some wear occur between the rings and the cylinder walls. Thus, we're not using a synthetic oil, because that would prevent that wear from happening and your rings from seating correctly. Now, in general, industry practice, break-in is the first 500, well, it's about the first 1,500 miles of driving. Which this car is lucky if it sees 1,500 miles a year. So, and usually the first oil change, if you get a remanufactured engine or something like that, is at 500 miles. Now, I've driven 0 miles so far, but I do think, not from the perspective that the rings are done seating after my first 30 minutes of screwing around in the garage, but that was plenty of time for a bunch of different things to move around each other for the first time, and for rare metals to accumulate in the filter and in the oil. And I think it doesn't hurt to change the oil after that first 30 minutes to just flush out the contaminants, fully understanding that I will still be doing a 500-mile oil change and a 1,000-mile oil change to complete the piston ring break-in. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the oil in it before I forget and roach the engine. And then we'll throw axles in it, and that will leave kind of the last step of collecting my intercooler piping and intercooler and taking them to a car wash, at which point I'll be able to come back, assemble that, plug in my Arduino, and hopefully we can take it for a test drive. Fingers crossed. You can see my coolant leak is nice. It's out of this dumb O-ring sensor. I don't know why. That's actually my least favorite thing on all of the ALH setup so far, is the fact that VW decided to clip a sensor in with like an O-ring that will definitely wear out over time. It's stupid. Instead of making it thread in or something strong. In that vein, I'm gonna probably have to find a new elbow to occupy that space. Anyhoozle, so 5 should put me well on the dipstick right now. because nothing has been pumped through. To be fair, the oil cooler is now full, so 5 quarts actually could be right on the money, assuming you didn't fully drain the oil cooling system. So I'm going to unplug this. This is my fuel pump pin on, and that will let me crank the whole engine without starting it, which is what I want. And if I can do that, then I can prime my oil system without firing the motor. Cool, and that was 25 psi oil pressure. So we have now pumped that oil through the rest of the engine, and if you're ever wanting to be particularly methodical with a certain car, this is the way to do it, since most damage in an engine comes from turning it on without oil pressure. And so by cranking it without, giving it fuel and actually starting it, you don't have many of the forces you normally would while the engine is running, and so it's a lot better for it in terms of cold starting or getting the oil to flow first. Anyhow, on Fords specifically, I'm not sure, it's like the one thing Ford did right, you can actually press your accelerator pedal all the way to the floor and the gas pedal. Well, that's the same thing. You can press the gas pedal and the brake to the floor at the same time, and then it enters clear flood mode, so you can actually crank the car and it won't start. So you can similarly prime an engine that way. So on your engine of choice, you could figure out how to wire up the ignition a certain way, or you could look up if your car has a clear flood mode, and then you'd be able to crank it without starting it, which is much better for bearings. All right, and then we need to free the intercooler, which I have managed to stuff in front of everything. You get these mounting bolts off. No. And then this one is also the boot I need to trim later because it is far too close to my cowling. This is all pre-turbo intake piping, which I am not going to bother washing. It wouldn't hurt to do it, but this has all been air filtered, and there's no weird possibility of some particle entering it. Whereas the rest of this is post-turbo piping, which there's not that much of it, but all of this could easily be full of oil and or previous turbo shrapnel, and it's definitely worth washing it. So these couple of pipes is what I'm washing, and the couplers I am probably just gonna clean by hand with some brake clean and a rag. That'll be fine. But those pipes, and especially the intercooler, are all getting blasted out with water first, because that will help flush any contaminants that are inside of them or have been collecting in them while they're sitting apart. Okay, I'm back. I washed the intercooler, I washed the pipes, put my shift linkage and axles in there. A quick word on Mark 1/020 axles. If you're reinstalling them or even installing new ones, it's highly recommended you re-grease the CV joints. So you probably want to use like any kind of Molly EP grease. You can kind of get it in the tub. Throw that in there. Make sure there's no slop in your CVs, and then when you go to torque your wheel bearings, it's very important you torque them correctly, because if you just under tighten them, you'll roach your wheel bearing, and if you over tighten them with an impact, you'll also roach your wheel bearing, and if you set your car down before they're torqued, you'll also roach your wheel bearing. So what I find is best is you can put the rotor, well the rotor's already on, but put 2 bolts, 2 lugs in the rotor so it doesn't spin, and put a screwdriver between the rotor and the caliper, and then you can torque your axle nut to 150 foot-pounds while the car is still on jack stands without having to set it down on tires first. I cannot tell a lie. My buddy came by the other night when I was trying to finish this, and we were just talking, and I forgot to film. And I just so happened to finish it. So, this is what's going on. It appears my coolant leak has screwed off for the moment. It's in. It runs, and it drives. And with a few small tweaks today before I drive it again, we will go on a test drive together. So, kind of the last few things I did was get my intercooling piping sorted. It's very similar to the last layout with a few minor tweaks. We still have, we'll work in reverse, intake manifold, same intake manifold, working backwards to intercooler, which is up front, and then back around to the turbo. That's all charged piping. And then the intake piping, because I have my oil cooler over here now, and it's really tight, and to be fair, there wasn't necessarily good airflow in this corner to begin with, I actually managed to squeak my intake tube all the way up to here, which I'm actually really excited about. I feel like this is like the best possible place to put it, especially because when you put the hood on, the vents are about here. So it's out of the rain if it did rain, but it's still getting all the cold air that's forced into the rain tray, which is so good. So that might be my first actually cold air intake on this car, which is perfect. And a lot of this piping is in a cold place, so we're maximizing keeping the air cold instead of running it through a hot engine bay, which is huge. Other things I tidied up the other day are kind of like just like connecting the Arduino, which to be fair isn't that fun to film anyways. I initially got one of the power wires crossed in the sense that it's supposed to be 5 volts and I was running it to 12 and I couldn't figure out why the thing was bugging out. Turns out it needs 5, not 12 to that one wire. And that made it work much better. So the VNT system is back online, not much change there otherwise. And I mean, that's about it. So far, the one tiny annoying leak I have is that this sensor in the back of the coolant elbow leaks. And I really hate how this coolant elbow looks to begin with. So I think the next time I'm away, I'm going to take this with me and drain the coolant, and I'm going to model this up in 3D print one that's just an elbow. Because also I ran this top head steam hose, which is like hot coolant, back to my drain bottle, which isn't the end of the world, but it's not really where it's supposed to go. It's supposed to go into this main hose that goes into the radiator, because it too is hot coolant. So I think I'll be able to run, if I 3D print my own elbow to begin with, then I can make a barb sticking out of it and run the steam hose directly into that, and it'll look super clean. That's the plan there. Couple of like tiny kinks to work out. I actually did take it for a very brief test drive, and we will go on one again today. Just kind of right off the bat, things to notice. I forgot I had a new clutch already, and went to engage it and was like, holy shit! Because the clutch now, instead of having maybe, I don't know, like this much pedal travel to engage it, has like this much pedal travel to engage it. Fortunately, the ALH is super torquey and does not stall, even though I've basically been clutch dropping it at idle by accident. So what needs to happen is I need a little less free play in it, because right now it makes it kind of weird. So I think that Might require a space here because I think my adjustment is pretty far out already. And then my shift linkage just feels really stiff, so that needs some lube. And my steering wheel is off center. Minor details. Oh, and then the one actually somewhat important detail from my test drive is that right now, this thing is extremely underfueled, which is tough because it's also idling in such a way that it's idling high regardless. Like, not regardless, but I have the idle setting turned basically all the way down, and yet my fuel screw setting like isn't terribly aggressive yet. So I'm worried that I don't actually have much adjustment there. As in order to make it idle okay, I might be able to add another half turn of fuel screw, but I'm concerned that that is just not enough. Right now the exhaust is completely clean, and if you mat it in first gear or any gear, like to the floor, it doesn't soot at all. So we are drastically underfueled for being a high horsepower machine right now, and I'm not exactly sure why, but we're gonna have to play with it. So before we go on today's test drive, I'm gonna go ahead and start by turning the LDA adjustment all the way in, and this is more than anything, it's to just take the LDA out of the tuning equation, because all this does, as we recall, is limit fuel up to a certain boost pressure. And I want to take that limitation out of the picture so that even at idle, if I hit the gas all the way, I'm seeing how much fuel we're really getting. So that's one adjustment I'm going to make. And then I probably will try to tune it with the standard idle screw and fuel screw method until I have an acceptable idle still, hopefully. It's also kind of funny because the car's been up here on jack stands for like months now. And when I set it down, I thought something was wrong because it's back to being at like my knee height, but nothing's wrong. It looks way better on the ground. Okay, so the idea here is that anytime you adjust your fuel screw, it completely shifts how fueling acts in the pump. And so it's prudent anytime you do that, or anytime you're trying to get a good adjustment in general on the pump, is to turn in what people call the smoke screw or your LDA adjustment. And we're just trying to take this thing out of the picture because it limits fuel. And if we're trying to see how much fuel we're getting, it's not very useful to be limiting it via boost mechanism while we're doing our base tuning. Then once you have your base tune all happy and nice, then you go back to playing with this to start limiting fuel at lower boosts. Okay, so now we're doing the pump tune part of this, and it's actually kind of nice on the TDI pump because normally this would be slammed up against here on the IDI setup, and now it's not. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen both fuel screw and idle screw. And something key that I think should be mentioned is that either if you're going to do this by yourself and you don't have an easy way to shut your car off from the engine bay, you should maybe get someone to help you and just stand by in case your car starts to run away while you're doing this adjustment, because adjusting a pump on the motor while it's running is a vaguely sketchy activity in terms of controlling the motor while you're doing it. Obviously you can rev it up, but if it revs too high because you gave it too much fuel screw, you can either panic, turn the fuel screw out, but you might screw that up. So this is my personal solution that I just added, and I don't know why it took me this long, is I just added a spade connector on my fuel pin, you know, car on, basically, wire. So if I want to shut it off while I'm tuning, all I have to do is pull this wire and the car will shut off, which is super helpful. So that was like only a quarter turn. As you can see, I got basically no adjustment out of that activity. The fuel screw is really, really touchy, especially on the TDI. Oh my word. So we got basically nothing. No gains from that, if I had to guess, but we'll drive it. Let's go take this thing for a test drive. Okie dokie. We go for test drive now. We're not going for a very long test drive. We're just gonna go see what's good. As you can probably already tell, the fuel pump is a little funny. Like right now it's idling because I dragged the clutch on it a little bit. But if you don't do that, then it's like a near just rev hang kind of thing. Oh, I'm getting better with the clutch today. Like that rev hang. Oh, we have a little bit of smoke today, that's good. So smoke screw adjustment did something to give us some lower RPM fuel. And we'll get into it just a little. So this is like matted, and you can see, or can't see in the video, but the exhaust is like clear. If you look. So, I don't know how I feel about that. And the fact that like right now it's tuned up as much as it could be, and it's still gonna rev hang immediately when I take it out of gear here. Yeah, like that. So you get the gist of it. Things look good though. Whew, it's hot. So as you can see, we got work to do. It's in and everything works, and that's the the absolute bare minimum I've achieved so far. It looks like that might still be leaking or might not. There's a few things I still need to get to stop leaking. One of them is the brake reservoir, which is a real pain. And it's slow as hell, and my fuel pump control is garbage. You know, that was as tuned up as I could have it with these settings, and it rev hangs like a mother and still has absolutely no fuel. So I'm gonna have to do some tomfoolery in the pump department to make this work hopefully a lot better, because right now it's pretty underwhelming. It feels like maybe we're making 100 horsepower on a good day, if that. I also don't have the boost turned up yet, but it's not even worth it. We don't have enough fuel. So that's what's going on. That's where we're at. The car works. It runs and drives, which is excellent. And now I'm excited to dive in to start tuning this and making it an actually exciting and usable power plant. Thanks so much for watching.